Welcome, folks. If you're like me, it's just swirling stuff going on. You know, Kushner talking about what didn't happen and the Russians who didn't, and special counsel investigating and congressional committees holding hearings about the same thing. And you just get tired. You say, I don't want to hear any more about it. Well, today you're going to hear about something that really matters. That is tax reform. And the Trump administration apparently is all out there organizing tremendously around the country down to the precinct level. They're going out with the sheriffs and the city council members to get together a consensus to cut your taxes. We should all be applauding. In just a moment, we're going to be talking to an expert who will be at the White House this day to talk about his tax reform plan. Wendy.
Republicans in the Senate are going to try again today to move ahead on a health care bill, and President Trump is making it clear that it's time to repeal Obamacare. Ben Kennedy brings us the story from Washington.
President Trump increased the pressure on Republican senators as they prepare to take on health care again. As he said, it is time for the GOP to finally fulfill their 7-year promise to repeal and replace Obamacare. On Monday, Trump stood with families he called victims of Obamacare, suffering through high premiums and broken promises.
Any senator who votes against starting debate is telling America that you are fine with the Obamacare nightmare, which is what it is.
But even Republican senators weren't clear going into today if they will vote to repeal and replace Obamacare or just repeal it for now and try to come up with a replacement plan later. In a burst of optimism, Senator John McCain, recently diagnosed with brain cancer, announced he'll return to Capitol Hill for roll call. Despite the outcome of today's vote, the White House plans to move ahead with the rest of the president's economic agenda. Tax cuts are set to take center stage, even if the health care bill fails. Is this going to be tax reform or tax cuts?
There's a real debate going on now. There are some proponents of reform, which the country really needs, who would like to go in that direction. There are other proponents who say, let's just cut taxes across the board.
It's been more than 30 years since Congress passed a major tax reform law. Greg Valliere of Horizon Investments sat down with CBN to explain what a new bill could do to improve the tax code. What will tax reform look like as compared to what people are hoping to see?
Well, two big components. One would be significant business tax cuts, going from a 35% top rate to maybe low 20s. The president wants 15. I don't think he's going to get that.
The other major component, it appears the White House has a plan, aiming to focus cuts and taxes for millions of individual Americans.
We'll see rates come down a bit. We'll see a change in the way people deduct. We might see the estate tax end, and we'll probably see the death of the alternative minimum tax.
The administration is reportedly very organized in its push to pass a tax bill and will start pitching tax reform in mid-August, aiming to take shape in the fall and signed into law early next year. Ben Kennedy, CBN News, Washington.
Well, joining us now is an economist who's going to the White House because the National Economic Council will be reviewing his plan for tax reform. He was an advisor to the Trump campaign, and he's with Freedom Works. Stephen Moore. It's a pleasure to welcome him back right now. Steve, good to see you. All right.
Hi, Pat. Boy, I loved the interview you did with Donald Trump. Was it last week or the week before? That was just sensational. My two icons in the same room, and kudos on a great interview.
Well, it was a privilege, and I really enjoyed it. We had a lot of fun together. I mean, it was just relaxed. You know, I did it. I didn't have one single note with me. We just flowed along together, one thing after another. It was just fun. He enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. Anyhow.
Great interview.
Well, listen, you've got a tax plan, and is the president going to follow what you're suggesting, or has he got something else going?
Well, first of all, we need to overhaul the tax system. I don't think very many Americans disagree with that. It is. Did you know it's 80,000 pages, the tax code, Pat? So it is mind-numbingly complex. It's complicated. It doesn't work for America in terms of competitiveness. We know that we are losing jobs to other countries because we charge our businesses the highest tax rate in the world. We have higher tax rates, Pat, than Russia, Sweden, Cuba. You know, I mean, what's wrong with this picture? So we got to bring those jobs back by bringing those taxes down. And I think that can get done. But what's standing in the way right now, Pat, is that health care bill that you were just talking about. You got to get Obamacare repealed before the Republicans can move on to tax reform. Well,
they're bringing up that repeal thing, and it looks like even John McCain, who's as sick as he is coming on the floor to vote. Hey, are there enough votes now to repeal the thing?
I was afraid you were going to ask me that question because I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. By the way, what a hero John McCain is to come back to Congress when he's just been diagnosed with cancer, to be there to vote. It shows how strongly people feel about getting rid of Obamacare and replacing it with something that will work. I mean, the stakes are so high here, Pat, politically and as a policy matter. I agreed with what the Wall Street Journal said in their editorial last week, that this is a generational defining moment for the Republican Party. As you know, they've been promising for 7 years now in every election, give us the power and we will get rid of this health care bill and give you truly affordable health care. They're struggling mightily to get to those 50 votes. They're, as my last count, they're still a couple of votes short, Pat.
Well, I tell you, those ladies, the one from Maine and one from Alaska, seem to be determined to gum up the works. But I tell you, their future may be somewhat in doubt if they do it, because I think the president's going after them. Let me ask you this, Steve. I mentioned this to the president. Would you accept merely cutting taxes, or should we go for a whole reform of the tax code?
Well, I would like to, in a perfect world, Pat, I would love to just, tear up the entire, 80,000-page tax code and start over and come up with something very simple and that is comprehensible, where most Americans, remember when Steve Forbes talked about that postcard tax return, we could do that. I'm skeptical that that can get done this year. And so what I've been recommending with my buddy Art Laffer and Larry Kudlow and Steve Forbes is, let's do the tax cut now. Let's get those business tax rates down, give some relief to American families to bring jobs back, because that could get done in the next month or two. And then in 2018 and 19, we have a big national discussion about how to fix this tax system. Incidentally, one of the things that we put in that tax plan when I was working with Donald Trump was something that was just mentioned on your preview, which was the estate tax. I believe the death tax is the most immoral tax of all, Pat. I mean, I think about people like my father, who worked his whole life to build up a business, worked 50, 60, 70 hours a week to build that up from scratch, and was not a rich man, but he built up the business. And now when he dies, the government's going to take 50% of that away from him. He paid his taxes every year, and that's the typical small businessman who built. That's why people build up wealth and build up a business so they can pass it on to their kids. That's the American way. The estate tax prevents that from happening.
Do you think the Democrats are going to, demagogue this bill? It's a tax cut for the rich. Well, why will they do that? I mean, the American people need this tax cut, and this is clearly a middle class and lower income tax cut. It's a cut for every American. It's not for the rich. Is that correct?
Even the Congressional Budget Office, which I don't normally agree with, Pat. Yeah. I think they've been totally wrong on the Obamacare numbers. But even the Congressional Budget Office says when you cut the business taxes, the people who benefit from that, 60 to 70% of the benefits go to the workers. And that would make sense. Look, you can't have jobs without healthy businesses. And, that old saying that liberals love jobs but hate employers. You can't have jobs without employers. And when I go around the country and talk to, businessmen and women who run great companies or even small companies, I say, if you get this tax cut and you're able to keep more of what you earn, what are you going to do with it? And they say, we're going to plow it back into the business to grow the business, hire more workers, pay workers more, maybe purchase another truck or more machinery that the workers can use to be more productive. So the business tax cut helps middle-class workers. You've got that exactly right, Pat.
Well, now, our economy has been growing at an unbelievably weak 1% GDP. Yep.
Right.
Can this get it up to 3%, do you think, with this tax cut?
I think that in combination, by the way, the growth rate last year was about 1.5%, which is barely staying out of recession. So it's very low. And historically, our historical growth rate, by the way, going back to 1900, is about 3.3%. So when you ask me, can we get 3%? Of course we can. This is America. Now, there are a lot of liberal economists who say they don't think we can grow faster than 2%. But we have to do a couple things, Pat. We have to do the tax reform. That will juice growth. And then we have to do the pro-America energy policy. You know, have talked about that. We can produce $150 billion more output of our natural gas and oil and coal. And then you do the deregulation. And by the way, Donald Trump is not getting enough recognition for what he has done on the regulatory front, where the huge flurry and avalanche of regulations that came down upon businesses and families under Obama, that has come to a grinding halt. There's a good reason, by the way, why the stock market is at an all-time record high now, because businesses and investors and families are very optimistic. But if they don't get this agenda done, Pat, I'm afraid we're going to see a sell-off of stocks because people say those Republicans don't have their act together.
Well, it looks like there's a real push to get grassroots support for this one. For the health care bill, it really wasn't sold very well to the American people. People didn't understand what it was, and so you got all these surveys saying, well, the American people don't want it. Well, obviously, they can't stand Obamacare, so they do want it, but the polls indicate they don't. So this time, what's being done in the grassroots to get the pressure, you know? Remember Ronald Reagan said they don't have to see the light, they need to feel the heat. So is the heat on them now?
You know what? I think you make a good point about Ronald Reagan. You know, I was in the Reagan administration at the end of his term, but remember in his first couple of years in office, when he passed his historic tax cut, the biggest tax cut in American history that really got America out of that horrible mini depression we had in the late 70s and early 80s. Remember, Pat, he went on TV at least 2 or 3 times on national TV from the Oval Office, and he made the pitch right to the American people. This is why we need to do this. The Democrat plan won't create the jobs. And he explained it to the American people. I think Donald Trump needs to do that. Next time you talk to him, Pat, tell him he's got to go on TV and really make the correct, because you know this, other than CBN and maybe Fox and others, the media is beating him up every day. They're not allowing him to get his message out. He has to go directly to the people.
Well, we'll tell him that hopefully somebody will listen to this program and hear you say that. But absolutely, Steve, we've got to do it. But I understand their administration people and others really hitting the grassroots right now, and hopefully it's going to be successful because we desperately...
Everywhere I go, people come up to me and they say, we got to get this tax cut down. When are you going to cut our taxes? I mean, we haven't had a tax cut in this country for 15 years, and Obama raised taxes on everyone. Incidentally, the Obamacare, remember, was financed by 6 or 7 major tax increases, not just on rich people, but everybody, everyone who uses drugs or has a health plan or uses medical devices. All of that taxes went up. We got to repeal the taxes. And Pat, yes, we can get. You asked me if we can get to 3%. I think we can get to 4%. And by the way, Donald Trump thinks we can get to 5.
Well, the congressional budget office won't give you credit for any of it yet, but we talked about dynamic storing. But nevertheless, Steve, we're going to get it, and I think the American people want it now. This will be a great victory for the administration. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Pat. Have a great week.
All right. Wendy, maybe.
I love Steve's energy. Well, let me ask you this, because the stock market's been doing so great since Trump's been president. If the tax cuts go through, how much better can the economy get?
If the economy hits 2-3%, there's some, I was reading the other day, one forecaster saying that Dow could hit, 30,000 or something.
30,000, wow.
Yeah, I mean, or higher. Actually, he actually said higher, but I won't mention it. But it could go up. I mean, it could be a blowout, but nevertheless, the blowout is possible if we have the economy moving if the economy starts moving at 3% to 4% a year. I mean, there'll be a huge burst of enthusiasm.
Wow.
And lots of people working and people getting raises and all that stuff. I mean, it'll be flowing through. And the Democrats are going to stand there like the Grinch that stole Christmas. They're going to try to take Christmas away from the American workers. And all I'm saying is, folks, you ought to get out there and call your congressman, call your senator, get on the phones and make it happen.